They were once known as snow elves, not monsters, not savages, not the hunched blind creatures we find lurking in the deepest ruins. They had names, homes, art, faith. Before everything was lost, they lived under the sky. They ruled parts of Skyrim long before the Nords crossed the Sea of Ghosts. The Snow Elves had their own cities, their own temples, their own way of life. You can still find the remains if you know where to look. Ruins buried under the ice, old walls in the cliffs. And in the Forgotten Vale, hidden behind ancient wards, there's a place that shows a different side of them. Towers carved into stone arches, bridges stretching over frozen rivers, statues of Ariel untouched by war. This was not a primitive people hiding in caves. They were builders. They understood magic better than most races ever would. They shaped their world with purpose and care. Ariel was at the center of their faith. Their temples reached to the skies in his name. They believed he watched over them, that his light would guide them through shadow. And for a time, they were strong. But the world was already changing. Humans had come from Atmora and started building. Sartal rose on the southern edge of Snow Elf lands. There was tension from the start. These new settlers were loud, fast, and aggressive. The Snow Elves didn't trust them. They saw the humans as reckless and disrespectful. Still, they didn't wipe them out at first. It wasn't open war, not yet. It was uneasy peace, the kind where both sides watch each other closely, waiting. The Snow Elves were used to being in control. They didn't think the humans could take Skyrim from them. They had numbers, but not the kind that threatened an empire. The elves had magic, cities, and centuries of experience. But pride can be a weakness. The Snow Elves let themselves believe that nothing could truly change. And when things did change, they changed fast. One night, Sartal burned. The Snow Elves attacked with force, wiping out almost every settler. What led to the attack is still argued over. Some say the humans had discovered something powerful buried under the city. Some say the elves were afraid of what the Nords might become. Either way, it was a mistake. Ysgramor survived the attack and fled back to Atmora, and when he returned, he didn't come alone. The 500 companions followed him across the sea, and with them came fire, axes, and war. From that point on, the Snow Elves began to fall. Their temples were smashed, their towers burned. The Nords took city after city. Some elves fought, some fled into the mountains, some tried to hide, but nowhere was safe forever. As Nord settlements spread, the Snow Elves were pushed back further into the wilds. Their old roads crumbled, their names faded from maps, but not all of them vanished. Some tried to survive in smaller groups. Others sought shelter in places where the Nords wouldn't follow, and when they were desperate enough, they made a choice that would doom them completely. They went underground. At the time, they didn't know what would happen. They saw the Dwemer as strange but advanced. The Deep Elves lived far below the surface, untouched by war and offered safety. The Snow Elves thought they had found a way to preserve what little they had left. They were wrong. But before that fall, before blindness and betrayal, before they became something else, they were a people of light, a people of frost and stone and starlight. They left behind music and art, rituals and stories. The Falmer we know today are all that remains, twisted and broken. But their story starts here, in the snow, in the temples of Ariel, in the time before everything fell apart. Before everything fell, before the betrayal underground and the twisted things that came after, there was a single moment when it all changed. The Snow Elves had lived across Skyrim for generations. They built strongholds into cliffs, carved roads through mountains, and filled their temples with light. They were the first to hold Skyrim in any lasting way, but their place in history was about to break. From across the Sea of Ghosts came men from Atmora. These were not farmers or traders. They were warriors, survivors of a harsh land, looking for something better. Led by Ysgramor, they brought with them stories of cold hunger and sharp steel. They arrived on longboats and began to build. Sartal rose from the snow in the southern lands. It wasn't a city at first, just a settlement, but it grew quickly. The Nords were stubborn. They built walls, homes, forges. They dug into the stone and claimed the land. To the Snow Elves, this was dangerous. They watched from the hills, quiet and uneasy. Some tried to deal with the settlers peacefully. Others warned that the humans were spreading too fast, that their fire would reach further than anyone expected. Sartal was seen as a threat, or maybe an insult. The reasons aren't clear anymore. All we know is that one night, the Snow Elves struck. They came down in force and destroyed the city. That night was later called the Night of Tears. Buildings were pulled down, families slaughtered. Almost no one was left alive. But Isgramor survived. He escaped with his sons and sailed back to Atmora. And he didn't stay there. He came back with vengeance. With him were the 500 companions, a force the Snow Elves had never faced before. Hardened warriors, each one ready to kill or die for their kin. When they landed again, they didn't stop. Town after town fell to them. The Snow Elves fought, but the Nords had fury on their side. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to erase what had been done to them. Temples burned. Watchtowers collapsed. Even places deep in the hills weren't safe. The war wasn't short. It stretched across years. Every time the Snow Elves tried to regroup, the Nords pushed harder. They had numbers, weapons, and the will to keep moving. Slowly, the old roads went quiet. The great statues crumbled. Auriel's light faded from the shrines. Some elves went into hiding. Some took to the caves. A few tried to strike deals with the enemy or with each other, but nothing held for long. Isgramor and his line became heroes to the Nords. Their victory became legend. The companions were remembered as founders. But for the Snow Elves, there was no victory, no last stand, just retreat after retreat. Even those who weren't killed had their names forgotten, and the places they built were covered in moss, ice, and silence. Sartal was eventually rebuilt by the Nords. They dug deep into the ruins and found strange things. Artifacts and magic older than the Snow Elves themselves. Some say that's why the city was destroyed in the first place, that the elves feared what lay beneath, but the truth is buried with the dead. What's certain is that after Sartal, everything changed. The Snow Elves were no longer rulers. They were survivors. Their cities were gone, their numbers shattered. Most of Tamriel forgot they ever held power, and the Nords became the new masters of the land. They built Whiterun, Windhelm, and Solitude on bones they didn't even recognize. For the Falmer, this was the start of exile. Their kind scattered into the mountains and the caves, clinging to what little they had left. The Night of Tears wasn't just the fall of one city. It was the spark that burned away their place in history. A single moment that led to centuries of silence, darkness, and slow, quiet defeat. And once that silence settled in, it never really lifted. After Isgramor and his companions crushed the Snow Elves above ground, the survivors were left with almost nothing. Their cities were ruins, their temples were broken, their families scattered. The land they once ruled had turned against them. Hunted by Nords, starving and desperate, they needed shelter anywhere it could be found, and in that moment they looked beneath the earth. The Dwemer didn't live like other elves. They built cities in the deep places of the world, steam-powered machines, humming halls, and glowing forges far below the mountains. Cold, logical, and secretive, the Dwemer weren't known for charity, but they weren't at war with the Snow Elves either. So when the first broken groups of survivors came knocking, the Dwemer opened their gates. It looked like mercy. They gave them food and shelter. They offered a place where Nords couldn't find them. But nothing the Dwemer gave was ever free. The Snow Elves didn't step into a sanctuary. They walked into a cage. At first, it was just the food. Everything they were given came from deep fungus gardens, cultivated by the Dwemer for generations. The elves were told to eat, to grow strong again. They were told it was safe, but it wasn't. That fungus was toxic to them. Not right away, not in ways they could see. It didn't kill them, it just changed them. slowly. One by one, they started going blind. Not from illness, but from something deeper. It was permanent, and it was happening to every one of them. The Dwemer never stopped feeding them the same food, and they never explained why. Blindness meant weakness, and weakness meant control. The Snow Elves had trusted them, and now they couldn't even see the world around them. Once the blindness set in, the rest followed. The Dwemer had no interest in restoring their sight or stopping the damage. Instead, they used it. With their vision gone, the Snow Elves became tools. They were put to work in the deepest tunnels. Laborers, miners, test subjects, names were taken, languages forgotten, generations passed in the dark. The Dwemer didn't treat them like kin. They treated them like machines. Flesh that could be shaped, trained, and used. The Snow Elves weren't just blind, they were remade. The Dwemer taught them to obey signals and sounds. They kept them separate from the world. They never saw sunlight again. Over time, they stopped being Snow Elves. No books recorded the change. No history marked the day their culture ended. It just faded, like everything else. Even the word Falmer was rarely used. They became invisible to Tamriel. If anyone remembered them, it was only in whispers or false stories. The Dwemer were the only ones who still knew what they were. And they didn't care. Deep inside the metal halls, the Falmer were shaped into something else. Twisted, hunched, and silent. Their eyes were useless, but their ears sharpened. Their skin grew pale, and their hands clawed. Their minds were bent to survival and pain. The Dwemer had taken a people and hollowed them out. When the Dwemer disappeared from the world, the Falmer were left behind. But they weren't free. By then, it was too late. The damage was already done. They had no culture left, no cities, no gods, just rage and instinct. And the old betrayal carved deep into their bones. They didn't know what the sun looked like. They didn't remember their old names. They had nothing but the dark and the hatred that filled it. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It happened slow and quiet, like rot in the roots of a tree. The Falmer had been offered help, and they paid for it with everything they had. Sight, memory, purpose. Even language fell apart over time. They spoke in shrieks and gestures, taught by sound and pain. What the Dwemer did wasn't loud. It didn't look like war. But it was worse. It erased the people while pretending to save them. And when the world finally looked their way again, all that was left was a shadow of what used to be. The Falmer weren't born that way. They were made, one blind step at a time. When the Dwemer vanished from the world, they didn't take their creations with them. The Falmer were left in the dark tunnels, blind, broken, and forgotten. But they didn't die. They couldn't go back to the surface. They wouldn't have survived the light, the cold, or the people who still remembered them as Snow Elves. So they stayed deep underground and kept living. Slowly, those deep tunnels became the only world they knew. Their eyes stopped working completely. The blindness that began with the Dwemer's poisoned food became permanent in their children and their children's children. Sight was no longer part of their lives. Instead, their hearing sharpened. They could feel sound in the stone. Small changes in air and movement became more important than light. Their bodies changed to match their new home. Skin turned pale and thin, their backs curved. Hands became long and clawed. Joints thickened, muscles shifted, and voices grew harsh. The Falmer had once sung in temples. Now they clicked and hissed to each other in strange, sharp tones. Language, memory, and names began to rot away. Without books, without teachers, without a reason to speak of the past, their culture unraveled. Their faith in Ariel was the first to vanish. Then their old stories. Then the words that carried them. All that remained were instincts, habits, and buried pieces of memory that made no sense anymore. What the Dwemer began, time finished. The Falmer didn't change all at once. It happened over generations. First, the body shifted, then the mind. They still remembered what it was to be hunted, what it was to serve. They knew pain, so they became cruel. They learned to set traps in the dark and strike without warning. No warning calls, no words, just silence, then screams. Over time, they began using other creatures as tools. The Shoras, giant, armored insects, became their beasts of burden and war. The Falmer raised them, trained them, lived among them. The stench and poison of the Shorus didn't bother them. They adapted to it. They used their resin to build hives, shape armor, and hold ground. Everything they did came from the need to survive underground. They built nothing new in the way the Snow Elves once had. No great halls or temples, just burrows and pits, lined with bone, fungus, and a scrape of claws. From the surface, it looked like they were gone forever. Most of Tamriel believed the Snow Elves had all died. Histories marked them as extinct or mythical. No one searched the old ruins or dared to go too deep. Those who did often didn't come back. In Skyrim, people spoke of shrieking things in forgotten tunnels, of hunters that saw without eyes and moved in silence. No one thought they were elves. They were just another danger, another reason not to go near the old Dwemer ruins. But the Falmer were still there. They had never stopped breeding, hiding, and remembering the pain. They hated the surface, hated what had been taken from them, and hated what they had become. They didn't know the names of Ysgramor or the companions anymore, but the rage was still there. It soaked into their bones, passed from parent to child. Even without language, they remembered betrayal. Not just from the Nords, but from the Dwemer, who blinded them, who used them, who then disappeared without explanation. That wound never healed. The Falmer didn't build cities or write books, but they kept that hatred alive. It gave them reason to keep going, to keep killing anything that came too close. Their world was sound, heat, and instinct. They moved in packs, followed old tunnels, and kept to the places where sunlight never reached. And while the surface world forgot about them, they grew stronger in the shadows. Over the centuries, they became something new. Not just blind elves, but a new kind of creature. Sharp, fast, patient, and angry. The last pieces of who they were had long since broken apart. Now they were monsters in the minds of surface dwellers. Hunched, shrieking, crawling things that dragged people into the dark. And that's how most people still see them. No one remembers their true name. No one knows their story. They're not called Snow Elves anymore. They're just Falmer. And that's all the world sees. The twisted things hiding in the deep. The Falmer don't trust anything that comes from above. They've spent too long in the dark, too many generations without sun, language, or safety. By the time they appear in the surface world again, their story is already lost. The only thing that remains is the hatred. It's not clean or simple. It's not built on speeches or books. It's buried in instinct, carried in blood. The Falmer see light and noise and smell and movement, and they respond the same way every time. They attack. They don't speak. They don't ask. They ambush. Every outsider is a threat. Every sound is an enemy. That's how they've lived for centuries. Isolation became their shield and their prison. They don't try to build above ground. They never go to cities or try to trade or speak. Their whole world is carved into caves and ruined halls that most people forgot. Dwemer tunnels, ice caves, places no one visits. Places so deep that even torches can't show the walls. That's where they live now, hidden, waiting, listening, and when someone comes too close, they strike. They don't charge head on. They wait. They track footsteps. They surround their prey and use poison. Arrows coated with chorus venom, sharp and fast. Traps on the floor. Nets. Noise. They know the tunnels better than anyone. They know how sound travels and how fear works. They've been doing this for longer than most kingdoms have existed, and they're not alone down there. They raise chorus like livestock and weapons. Those creatures are part insect, part horror. Their shells are thick, their mouths drip acid. The Falmer hatch them, feed them, and use them for war. Some ride them like mounts. Some live inside their nests, It's not clean or organized. It's wild, twisted, and effective. You don't see one Falmer, you see many. A swarm of pale shapes moving through the dark, silent until it's too late. But underneath all that, the noise, the traps, the poison, there's something worse. They don't know who they are anymore. The old names are gone, the stories are broken. Some of them feel the rage without knowing why. Others still hold on to pieces of memory they don't understand. Maybe it's a name. Maybe it's a symbol carved into a wall. A song with no words. A shrine to a god they no longer worship. The Falmer didn't just lose a war. They lost their identity. There's no history left to teach the young. There are no teachers, just survivors. Each new generation is shaped by the one before it, and each one forgets more than the last. All they have left is motion, hunger, and hate. Hate for the Nords who drove them underground. Hate for the Dwemer who blinded them. Hate for every surface race that walks in the light and doesn't know what it cost to live in the dark. They see all of it as betrayal, even if they can't explain it, even if they don't have the words. Some of the Falmer remember more than others. There are whispers about leaders or priests, hidden deeper than anyone's ever gone, ones who still speak in half-formed language, ones who remember the names of cities long buried. But if they exist, they don't come to the surface. They stay where no one can follow. For everyone else, the Falmer are monsters. They're not seen as elves, not as victims. Just things to fight in the ruins. Just shadows with blades. There are no diplomats, no stories from their side. No one mourns them because no one sees them as people. They are the forgotten, not dead, not extinct, just erased. And when someone falls into their world, when a traveler enters a cave too deep or touches a ruin that still breathes, they learn quickly that the Falmer haven't forgiven anything. They don't care who you are or what you came for. They've been waiting, they've been sharpening bones and crafting armor from the husks of chars. They've been listening. And when you step too far, they answer. There's no warning, no sign, just sound and pain and then silence again. That's the world they live in now, deep in the cracks of the earth. Still here, still angry, still forgotten. To be Falmer is to be alone in a world that forgot you were ever anything else. Once, you were an elf with temples, music, and sky. Now you're a thing that crawls and kills in the dark. The fall didn't happen fast. It was slow, piece by piece. First came the war with the Nords. Your cities burned. Your kin died. The surface turned to blood and ash. Then came the Dwemer, who smiled and said they would help, but they didn't. They gave you food that blinded your people. They gave you tunnels and work and no way out. You stopped being guests and became tools. The longer you stayed underground, the more your body changed. Your skin grew pale, your spine bent, your fingers sharpened. You stopped using words. You stopped singing. You forgot the names of your gods and your people and even yourself. And now, all that's left is instinct, hatred, and the dark. You can't go back to the surface. You die in the light. The cold would blind you again, this time in ways that never heal. You'd be hunted like an animal or cut down before you could speak. Not that you remember how to speak. You hiss and click and move with the showers. You sleep in bone hives and eat fungus and meat that would turn a man's stomach. You remember the pain, but not the cause. You don't know the word betrayal anymore, but you still feel it. Every step you take in a ruined Dwemer hall is a reminder that they lied, that they made you this way. They vanished, and you stayed, changed, angry, and broken. The worst part is that no one above ground cares. They think you're gone, or they think you're a threat, a monster, a whisper in a cave. They don't remember your songs or your statues. They don't write books about your fall. You're not in the histories. You're not even hated properly. You're ignored. Or worse, you're feared like a ghost story, told to scare children. And you know it. Every time a surface dweller stumbles into your tunnels, armed and afraid, you see it. They don't know who you are. They never did. but you remember enough to hate them anyway. You hate the light they carry, the weapons they hold, the clean armor and smooth words. You know what their kind did, even if you don't have the names anymore. You don't have a future. There's no leader uniting your kind, no grand plan, no dream of reclaiming anything. Your people can't read, can't write, can't leave. There's nothing waiting for you except more of the same. You live in ruined cities you didn't build, fight with tools made from bugs, and sleep under stone that was shaped by others. You eat what you can grow or hunt. You raise chorus like livestock, and let their poison do your fighting. You train your young the only way you know, through pain and silence. There's no room for comfort, no reason to hope, and still you live. Because you don't know anything else. You live to defend what little is left. A hive, a tunnel, a crack in the world where no one else walks. And when they do come, you fight. Because that's all there is. No diplomacy, no second chance, just a blade in a scream and the dark again. No one sees the sadness in you. They don't know there used to be scholars among your kind. Priests, artists, children, they just see your claws, your pale skin, your empty eyes. They kill you and move on, and they never ask what you were before. They never wonder why you are the way you are. If they did, they might see what it means to be forgotten, but they don't, and maybe they never will. So you stay in the deep, waiting. Not for salvation, but for the next footstep, the next torch, the next mistake. And when it comes, you strike. Because that's what you've become, not by choice, but by everything that was taken. Deep in Skyrim's hidden mountains, there's a place most people never see. A valley carved into the ice, glowing with magic that never faded. It's called the Forgotten Vale. To the Nords, it's just an old ruin tucked behind glacial walls. But for those who know what came before, it's something much more. It's one of the last places where you can still feel what the Snow Elves once were. Before the wars, before the betrayal, before the dark. You don't find cities there. Not anymore. What's left are altars, bridges, and temples built with care. You can still walk under stone arches marked with symbols of Ariel. You can still see where pilgrims once gathered. Water flows clean and still, touched by magic that hasn't faded. Most of Skyrim forgot the Snow Elves ever existed, but in the Vale their memory still lives. Not fully, just pieces, but enough to feel it. The most sacred place in the Vale is where Oriel's bow is kept. Not just a weapon, but a symbol of their faith. It sat locked away in the inner sanctum, guarded by those who never gave in to despair. The Snow Elves who lived here never took the Dwemer's poison. They didn't trade their sight for safety. They stayed faithful, even when it meant exile, even when it meant being hunted, even when their numbers thinned. One of them is still alive. His name is Jelibor. He stands alone in that frozen temple, the last true Snow Elf. He still speaks their language. He still wears their armor. He still follows their god. He remembers the time before. He knows what they lost. Jelibor doesn't lie about it. He knows his people are gone. He knows the Falmer crawling through the ruins are what's left of them. But he doesn't call them kin anymore. Not because he hates them, because they're too far gone. Their minds have changed, their hearts have hardened. They don't speak his language. They don't remember his name. They would kill him as easily as they'd kill anyone else. He's alone, not just in body, but in memory. He walks through ruins that meant something once and watches the wind erase the tracks behind him. The Vale is full of broken things, empty temples, broken shrines, statues that once stood tall now half buried in snow. Light filters through enchanted ice, casting soft colors on ancient stone. But no one sings there, no one prays. There's no more laughter, no more voices, just silence and snow. It's not just a graveyard, it's a shadow. A place where memory lingers because it has nowhere else to go. The Falmer don't come to the Vale in peace. They skitter through its edges, crawling from Dwemer tunnels, drawn by instinct or old scent. They don't know why this place matters. They just feel it. Maybe somewhere deep down, something inside them remembers. But they don't stop to wonder. They build hives in old towers. They smear filth over walls carved by priests. They sleep in places that once held songs. It's not mockery, it's all they know. The Falmer don't speak of their past. They don't write stories or teach children about the cities above. That history is gone, burned, broken, eaten. But the ruins still stand. And sometimes, that's enough. Enough to show what came before. Enough to make someone ask how things ended up this way. The story of the Falmer isn't written in books. It's carved in ruins, buried in snow, and whispered in old places like the Forgotten Vale. If you stand still long enough, you can almost hear it. Not words, but weight. Loss, you don't need a language to feel. Betrayal, you don't need a name to recognize. And something sadder still, the kind of silence that only comes after everyone who knew the truth is gone. That's where it ends. Not with fire, not with war. With one elf standing in a frozen temple, guarding a relic no one else remembers, and 1,000 blind cousins crawling through the dark, still angry at a world that doesn't remember them. There's no glory in it. No victory. Just the cold and the wind and the ruins. And maybe, if you look close, a hint of who they used to be. Before the fall, before the blind, before the dark.